The mirror that melted. In the heart of a city built on glass and light, Maggie was more than a person. She was a brand. Known to millions as a paragon of digital perfection, her every feature was a curated masterpiece of porcelain skin and shimmering blonde hair. She walked through the metropolitan sprawl with a cold, untouchable grace, her face staring down from massive digital billboards. To Maggie, the world was merely a gallery, and she was the only exhibit that truly mattered. Maggie's beauty was a shield she used to strike at others. She found a particular cruel amusement in Susan, a girl whose soft heart and constellation of freckles represented everything Maggie found unrefined. In the middle of a crowded plaza, Maggie let out a sharp, mocking laugh at Susan's expense, her designer-clad form towering over the other girl. While onlookers shifted, Susan stood with quiet dignity, her gaze lowered as Maggie's cutting words hung in the air like frost. The summit of Maggie's ambition was reached in a penthouse office made of glass and steel. Her agent, Alistair, slid a heavy document across the mahogany desk, a global cosmetics contract for eternal glow. As Maggie gripped the designer pen, she felt she had finally achieved immortality. She signed her name with a flourish, oblivious to the fact that she was signing away her humanity for a dream made of silicone and chemical light. The campaign launch was a frantic whirlwind of high-wattage studio lights and clicking shutters. Maggie applied the shimmering cream, a thick, pearlescent substance that felt strangely heavy and suffocating on her skin. Under the intense, burning heat of the photography lamps, she struck a pose for the cameras. She was a monument to perfection, waiting for the flash to capture a radiance that felt increasingly like a physical weight against her pores. Suddenly, the warmth of the lamps turned into a searing chemical fire. In the studio mirror, Maggie saw a sight that froze her blood. Her perfect features began to sag and run. Her skin was literally melting like wax under a flame, drooping in thick, horrifying folds of distorted flesh. Her long, straight blonde hair framed a face that was no longer human. There were no candles to blame, only the toxic cost of her own vanity. The aftermath was a silent, darkened room where the mirrors were all covered in black silk. Maggie lived in a self-imposed exile, her face now a hidden landscape of trauma. She sat alone in the shadows, her head and neck completely encased in thick, sterile white bandages and medical stripes like a mummy. She looked down at her phone, where the screen cruelly displayed the world moving on the moment her image broke. One evening, the weight of the silence became too much to bear. Long, blonde strands of hair escaped from the top of the mummy-like bandages, a reminder of the girl who had once lived for the spotlight. Her mother, Clementine, entered the room with a gentle step. Without a word, Clementine sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her daughter into a protective embrace, holding the bandaged Maggie as she finally allowed her tears to soak into the gauze. A soft, persistent knock eventually drew Maggie to the door. She opened it slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. On the landing stood Susan, holding a vibrant bouquet of wildflowers. They stood in a tense silence on the threshold. Maggie stood inside, her face still completely hidden by the heavy white wraps, looking directly at the girl she had once mocked. Susan looked back, her eyes full of an unexpected, gentle compassion. "I didn't think you'd come," Maggie whispered, her voice a fragile thread. Susan sat with her in the quiet room, where the air felt lighter than it had in months. Maggie's face remained a mystery, still completely covered with white gauze. Susan sat close, her warm smile a steady, grounding force as they talked face to face. Susan spoke of the beauty found in scars, and the strength it takes to begin again. The path to healing was paved with humility. Maggie began to find her way back to the world, though she remained cautious. As the swelling subsided, her face remained covered with gauze, except for her eyes and her forehead, which showed the focus and determination of her new life. She looked out at the world with a new perspective, her long blonde hair tied back, ready for the hard work of transformation. The day finally came for the dressings to be removed in the quiet hospital room. As the final layer of gauze fell away, Maggie reached for the mirror. Susan stood beside her, noticeably shorter than Maggie, and reached out to hold Maggie's arm firmly with one hand. Maggie stared at the glass held in her hand, but it reflected nothing but a dark, empty surface. She didn't need a reflection to know that she was finally whole. Years later, Maggie and Susan stood together on a stage, no longer as rivals, but as ambassadors of kindness. Maggie spoke to a captivated audience about the day her mirror melted and the beautiful life she found in the ruins of her vanity. She was no longer a masterpiece of branding, but a woman of substance. Beside her, Susan watched with immense pride. Maggie had learned that true beauty was the light that lived within the soul.